Behind the walls of the Marquis de Sade's castle, he committed horrors in the name of his hedonistic fantasies, but he couldn't keep his secrets hidden forever. One of his servants fled the castle in terror. When she made it back to her family, she recounted her story, and it chilled them to the bone. His parents called him Donatien Alphonse Francois. Since his mother was distantly related to the royal Princess de Condé, she served as her lady-in-waiting, meaning he was born in the luxurious Hôtel de Condé in Paris. His father, the Count de Sade, got to enjoy the fruits of his wife's labour and live in one of the most extravagant palaces in all of France. When de Sade was just a boy, his father abandoned the family. Not long after that, his mother joined a convent, leaving the young child all alone in the Hôtel de Condé. The servants spoiled the young boy rotten. They indulged his every fantasy, never saying no. Young Donatien wasn't the only boy running around the halls of the palace. Louis-Joseph de Bourbon, the Prince of Condé and a close relative of the king, was around his age. De Sade's caretakers made the two boys playmates, hoping to instill a lifelong friendship that could help de Sade later in life. They underestimated one thing though. At any age, the Marquis de Sade did not play well with others. One day he and the prince had a disagreement. The prince assumed that as the more important of the two, de Sade should defer to him. Prince or no, young Donatien was used to getting his way, and when he threw a tantrum, he really threw a tantrum. He pounced on the prince and viciously beat him to within an inch of his life, until servants finally arrived on the scene and tore him off. De Sade left the prince in such a sickening state that his attendants worried he might never recover. As he grew older, the Marquis de Sade only grew more and more deranged. With no parents in the picture, his uncle, the Abbé de Sade, did his best to educate the boy, but when he came of age, it was time for de Sade to go to a real school. His uncle sent him to the famed Lycée Louis le Grand, a prestigious second his noble roots. For a time, it seemed like the Marquis de Sade was becoming downright boring. He worked as a government official. He shacked up with Marie-Constance Quesnay, a one-time actress with a 6-year-old son, and he mostly laid low. But he couldn't completely give up his vulgarity. He kept writing his depraved novels and began publishing them anonymously. As the Reign of Terror began, de Sade became more and more critical of the new regime, specifically of the ruthless Maximilien Robespierre. As a result, the authorities removed him from his posts and threw him back behind bars for almost a year. By 1796, de Sade was completely destitute. He even had to sell his beloved Chateau de Lacoste, now a ruined shell of its former glory. Moving back to Paris, he eked out a humble existence. He released 2 of his most widely read books, Justine and Juliette, and like all his other works, they shocked readers. Unfortunately for de Sade, one of those readers was Napoleon Bonaparte, and he wasn't about to let the author of such scandalous books roam free. In 1801, Napoleon demanded that the authorities track down whoever had written that filth. The Marquis de Sade was already infamous for his activities and his writing, so it didn't take long to track him down and lock him up yet again. Following reports that de Sade was seducing young prisoners, because of course he was, Napoleon had him transferred to the nightmarish Bicêtre Asylum. De Sade's family managed to get him declared insane and transferred to the asylum at Charenton, where he'd been imprisoned many years earlier. Here he received much more lenient treatment. He even managed to convince the authorities that his lover, Marie-Constance, was his relative, so they allowed her to live there with him. After what he'd been through, this was basically a vacation for the Marquis de Sade, though he couldn't help but get in trouble anyway. Charenton's director, Abbé de Comier, was remarkably progressive for the time. He encouraged de Sade's writing as a form of therapy, and even allowed him to stage several of his plays for the Parisian public, using other patients as the actors. De Sade's plays were exactly as obscene as you'd think, and it was only a matter of time before the authorities nipped them in the bud. They demanded that Comier placed de Sade in solitary confinement and deprived him of pen and paper. In his final years, while still with Constance, the Marquis de Sade began an intimate relationship with the 14-year-old Madeleine Leclerc, the daughter of a Charenton employee. Their tryst lasted for 4 years, but finally, after 7 decades of sadism, debauchery and deviance, the Marquis de Sade's number was finally up. He died on December 2nd, 1814, at the age of 74. When all was said and done, the Marquis de Sade spent almost 29 years imprisoned in various fortresses and insane asylums across France. Though many of his works survive, there are entire troves of de Sade's writing that are lost to history, all thanks to his son's cruel betrayal. As you can imagine, the Marquis wasn't a great father, and his son deeply resented him. As soon as de Sade was gone, his son burned all of his remaining unpublished manuscripts to avoid further embarrassment to the family name. And with that, the Marquis de Sade was gone. His family did everything in their power to erase him from history and move on as if he had never existed. And they nearly succeeded. He remained almost completely unknown for over a century thanks to his family's suppression efforts. The few works of his that remained were all locked up in the infamous section of the National Library in Paris known as Enfer, or Hell. However, in the mid-20th century, one of his descendants, Xavier de Sade, took an interest in his disgraced ancestor. Xavier had never even heard of the Marquis until the 1940s, when he started researching and uncovered a store of de Sade's papers at the family chateau. He worked with scholars to have these papers published, and he worked tirelessly for the rest of his life to ensure that the world knew the Marquis de Sade. Thanks largely to the efforts of his family, the Marquis de Sade is well known today. The family continues to capitalise on his legend, owning a trademark on his name, a line of luxury goods called Maison de Sade, and even a Sade winery, with the Marquis signature on their bottles. For the horrors he committed on his unconsenting servants, the Marquis de Sade got off pretty easy, but he very nearly met a painful end years earlier. One of the servants who fled his castle in his heyday ran to her family and told them what the Marquis did to her. Her father, understandably, was horrified and furious. The authorities had proved incapable of stopping de Sade thus far, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. He travelled to Lacoste with one thing on his mind: vengeance. The Marquis de Sade was a lot of things: cruel, sadistic, depraved, and lucky. When his employee's father came to Lacoste, he brought a loaded pistol and a bullet for de Sade's heart. The man got within arm's reach of the Marquis, drew his weapon, and fired. But it misfired, saving de Sade's life. Once again, it seemed as though he was being watched over by a guardian angel. Or a demon? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos.